Next, here in the UK, the government will announce plans to fast-track the deportation of illegal migrants as part of a sweeping reforms of the UK's asylum policy. It comes after the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, told the BBC that illegal immigration was tearing the country apart. Well, she made the comment as she shared further details of changes to the system. So, under the new proposal, asylum seekers will only be able to stay for 2.5 years before being reassessed, instead of the current 5. At the moment, after 5 years, people can apply for permanent residence, but the new plans will require them to wait 20 years before being allowed to do that. However, the government says there will be ways to apply to live here permanently earlier if people use safe and legal routes to arrive and if they're working and contributing to society. Also plans to overhaul how human rights legislation is applied in migration cases. Well, this comes as the latest figures on migrant crossings in small boats found that the nearly 600 people who arrived over the week to Saturday brought the total for the year to nearly 39,300. That's up by nearly a fifth on this time last year, but just behind the level we saw at this stage in 2022, which was the peak year so far. Now, Joe Pike has more.
The sound of protests on the issue of immigration have been heard for months. Yesterday in Crowborough, East Sussex, people were opposing plans to house male asylum seekers at a nearby army camp. And the Home Secretary believes there are similar stories across the UK.
It is an issue that is dividing our country, and I see this polarisation all over the country, including in my own constituency. We have a system that is out of control, it's unfair, and it's putting huge pressure on communities.
Today, the Home Secretary will announce she's overhauling human rights law to make deporting illegal migrants easier. She plans to change the law so those refused asylum can't make multiple appeals. And Shabana Mahmood will also threaten visa bans on 3 African countries, Namibia, Angola and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, unless they start accepting the return of thousands of their criminals and illegal immigrants. The Home Office has for decades been seen as a political poison chalice, full of pitfalls and dangers. Shabana Mahmood's team hope this plan, which they argue is comprehensive and common sense, will avoid all of those. But there are already sceptics in the Labour Party. Folkestone MP Tony Vaughan has tweeted, "The Prime Minister said in September that we are at a fork in the road. These asylum proposals suggest we have taken the wrong turning. The idea that recognised refugees need to be deported is wrong. We absolutely need immigration controls, and where those controls decide to grant asylum, we should welcome and integrate, not create perpetual limbo and alienation."
This won't necessarily be the silver bullet, and I think the government recognises that. It's taking a quite broad approach. It's also focusing on enforcement, focusing on return deals. This is unlikely to be on its own a silver bullet that reduces small boat arrivals substantially. But is it a part of a broader strategy? Yes. Will people know about these kinds of restrictions such that it will deter them in large numbers? We'll just have to wait and see.
As the Home Secretary prepares to sell her plans to Parliament, both the Conservatives and Reform UK have expressed doubts as to whether these proposals will ever get through the Commons. Joe Pike, BBC News, Westminster.
And we go live to Westminster now. Our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman, is standing by. Hi, Henry. We're going to hear more details in Parliament later. What do you make of what we've heard so far?
Well, it is undeniably a very extensive package. In the government's eyes, the most extensive reforms to the asylum system in the UK for decades. And I think the fact that there's such an extensive package with so many different measures in it means there's going to be a lot for MPs to digest, and critically, a lot that Labour MPs from Shabana Mahmood's own side could potentially object to, as you were hearing from Joe there. I think important to stress that the unease, and I don't put it more strongly than that, but the unease with these plans within the Labour Party is not confined to the left of the Labour Party, not confined to the wing of the Labour Party, which pretty much objects to the direction of travel on every policy area from this government. There are people who might more typically ally themselves with Keir Starmer or with Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, who are a bit unsure about these plans, do wonder whether they go too far. So I think Shabana Mahmood's task in the House of Commons later today isn't just to put a parliamentary flavour on what we've seen her announce over the last few days. It is also to win over some wavering Labour MPs.
And what about any assessment about how effective these measures will or won't be?
Well, it's important to say that the measures are not going to be retrospective, so they won't affect the people who are already here under the existing system. And obviously, much of the frustration that we've seen on the streets as well as in our politics over the past year or two at illegal immigration as it stands is by definition about the situation as it stands. So I think, Shabana Mahmood is going to have to find a way to make an argument about why that is the case for those to her right. For those to her left, the argument that she will make, I think, is that the effectiveness that she hopes these measures will have is not just an end in and of itself, but is also in order to rebuild public confidence in the asylum system. I'm told the argument that she's been making privately to Labour MPs, and we may well hear her make in public in the House of Commons later today, is that in order to have the safe and legal routes for asylum seekers, which so many in the Labour Party and other political parties generally on the left of politics prize, you have to have public confidence in the asylum system, and she believes these measures are necessary to attain that.
Okay, Henry, thank you very much for that. We're going to speak now to Associate Professor of Political Science at Arthur University, Christina Bakker-Simonsen. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.
Yeah, of course.
So we're hearing, or we have heard certainly, a lot about the Denmark model here, the Labour Party in the UK trying to model some of these changes on what's happened in Denmark, a tougher approach to the whole system. Is the Denmark model a good model for the UK to try and copy?
Well, of course, that depends on the policy goals that one wants to achieve. But it's definitely correct to say that the Danish model is considered one of the most restrictive, if not the most restrictive in Europe when it comes to asylum, permanent residency, naturalization, and also the measures that are taken for immigrants in the country. And in terms of what those policies have sort of delivered in terms of policy outcomes, what we see is that the reduced welfare benefits that immigrants or asylum seekers receive have led those groups into poverty and increased rates of petty crime, and also poorer outcomes in school for the children of refugees. And more generally, these messages also heard by immigrants who've lived long-term in Denmark, including their children. So we see that this type of rhetoric that also accompanies the restrictive policies have led to lower levels of political trust, lower levels of democratic satisfaction, and national belonging, even among the second generation. So these are also things to take into account when introducing such policies.
Okay, Christina Bakker-Simonsen, we'll leave it there. We've lost a bit of the lighting on you there, but thank you so much for coming on the programme. We could hear you loud and clear. Thank you.